this, because then when you're an independent now.
Yeah.
So what does that say? That, to me, it says that you think the Republican Party is unsavable.
Unsavable. Oh, no doubt about it.
Because otherwise you would want to stay on, right, and
Right.
reform it, but you think
It can't be saved.
it cannot be saved.
I've never argued with that. I've never argued that of the false equivalency. I just said there is misinformation from both sides.
Well, sorry.
No, I lived through COVID. Don't tell me there wasn't
always has been.
misinformation.
But there's a difference between...
I lived through stupid policies based on bad information and stifled information.
This tea? Piping hot. Things between Bill Maher and MSNBC's Joe Scarborough just got messy. Their late-night clash had Scarborough backpedaling so fast, he might as well have moonwalked off set. Maher, never one to hold back, took Joe's ridiculous Trump take and shredded it like expired cheese. The result? Joe looking like he suddenly remembered an urgent appointment anywhere but there. So what exactly did Scarborough say to set Maher off? And how did Maher fire back? Stick around, because we're pouring this tea extra hot.
Trump said that he was going to use the military and the National Guard to arrest his political opponents. He was asked if he would back off of that.
He said no.
And he said no.
Yep.
In fact, he doubled down. He talked about Nancy Pelosi being evil, her husband being evil, Schiff being evil, talking about arresting them. He said he was going to execute the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff because he was disloyal to him. He told another chief of staff who was a general, I wish my generals were like Hitler's generals.
Just another day, and the Trump derangement syndrome rages on. Some people still can't accept the reality of Trump's presidency. They'll go to any length to twist his words, stoke fear, and flat out make things up, all to paint him as the villain. And of course, Bill Maher had his usual response. But before we dive into that, let's look at Joe Scarborough's blatantly biased take on Trump's statements. It's a textbook example of narrative manipulation. What's especially telling? Scarborough conveniently leaves out context, or worse, ignores why Trump might have said what he did in the first place. It's not just a lazy omission. It's intentional. A crafted, one-sided portrayal meant to sound more sinister than real. This kind of selective editing isn't just misleading, it's a deliberate attempt to twist reality and fuel outrage. The goal? Keep the Trump hate machine running full speed and make sure every conversation about him stays clouded in distortion.
There is no doubt.
There's no misinformation
There's
coming?
some disinformation from the left, but comparing it to what Donald Trump
No, of course,
spews
I
out
agree.
every day,
I
every
agree.
week, comparing it to what Elon Musk is spewing out, unfortunately, on X, you sound like Brett Stevens
I
right now,
don't.
with all due respect. It's a joke. That's a real time.
And
with
you
Bill
sound
Maher
like
joke.
him, who looks like Rachel Maddow. Or is
But you understand what I'm saying.
I've never argued with that. I've never argued that of the false equivalency. I just said there is misinformation from both sides.
Well, sorry.
No, I lived through COVID. Don't tell me there wasn't
always has been.
misinformation.
But there's a difference between...
I lived through stupid policies based on bad information and stifled information.
intent matters.
That's what Zuckerberg said. He said they were forcing us not to put out...
It's true. The left is guilty of almost everything they've accused Trump of doing. It's a textbook case of projection. As Bill Maher rightly pointed out, they're just as guilty, if not more, of spreading misinformation, especially through outlets like MSNBC. Need examples? Take your pick, the Russian collusion hoax championed by Rachel Maddow, the Hunter Biden laptop disinformation lie, the breathless reporting on the so-called fine people hoax. MSNBC has been caught pushing false narratives time and time. But here's what's truly alarming, their blatant refusal to own their missteps, while blowing Trump's so-called faults completely out of proportion. When Trump speaks, every word is dissected, distorted, and weaponized. But when left-wing politicians or media figures make outright false claims, silence, or a casual misunderstanding. This selective outrage, it's not just hypocrisy, it's strategy. It's about controlling the narrative, keeping their audience in a constant state of fear and anger, and making sure Trump remains the eternal boogeyman. Because if they had to admit their own misinformation, They'd have to admit they're no better than the man they love to hate, and that's a truth they cannot afford to let people see.
So you consider yourself a liberal, right?
I consider myself an old school liberal.
Old school liberal.
You have to make that distinction now because, you know, the word woke, which started out as a good thing, being alert to injustice, and a lot of people get triggered by the word because when they hear it, they think of it the old meaning, which was good.
Right.
You know, stay woke. But I'm sorry, language is a living, breathing entity. Words change and they migrate and they take on a different meaning. And woke now has to answer for, or for people have just used the word to ascribe a number of extreme things on the left.
Now, here's where I've got to push back on Maher. He makes it sound like only a tiny fraction of the left has gone off the deep end with wokeness. But let's be real, that's just not true. It's not some fringe movement anymore. It's the dominant culture in liberal circles, from politicians to media elites to Hollywood. Wokeness isn't a passing phase. It's the playbook. And Scarborough? Of course, he didn't have much to say in response, probably because deep down he knows Maher has a point. The only question is, how long can he keep pretending otherwise?
All this big, I think, challenge here to win over the undecided voters is to convince them that she's not part of what they suspect she might be, sort of a stealth version of the worst excesses of the left. I said there's a coalition of Trump voters, people who really like him, they certainly are those, and then there's people who don't necessarily like him that much, but they still think he's less crazy than stuff that strikes them as aggressively anti-common sense. That takes place on the left. So that's why they keep running that ad about sex changes in prison. You know, like could you,
and every football game.
Could you get every
every football game?
Could you get more third rail words into one sentence?
That's exactly my point. Kamala Harris would have a very hard time distancing herself from the woke left, assuming she even wants to. Because let's be honest, she's not just adjacent to the movement, she's entrenched in it. The woke left isn't some rogue faction whispering from the shadows trying to hijack the party. No, it is the party. This isn't fringe, it's mainstream. It's establishment. It's the loudest voice in the room. Just look at Harris's support. Her campaign rallies weren't packed with centrist Democrats pushing back on wokeness. They were filled with people embracing it. She had Hollywood A-listers fawning over her, journalists tossing her softballs like it was t-ball, media outlets sweeping inconvenient stories under the rug. That's not some radical outlier. That's the Democratic machine in full swing. So let's stop pretending wokeness is some fringe ideology. It's not the exception. It's the rule.
To, on the one hand, understand you benefited from racism if you're white. There's no doubt about it. And that has to be addressed. It can't be ignored. But also, I didn't personally do it. There's a middle ground there. It's very difficult.
Two things can be true at one time.
And they are both true at one time. I'm not personally responsible, but did I benefit? Yes, I'm sure I did. People our age definitely did. And so, if we can all agree on things like that, we could then come up with sensible policies.
Sensible policies? Here, I'm with Maher. The only real solution to the deep ideological divide tearing this country apart is a return to balance. We need a government that addresses real problems, without pandering to one group or alienating another. That means ditching the performative politics and focusing on what actually works. Take racism, for example. It's a complex, deeply rooted issue. It can't be solved with sweeping reactionary policies that prioritize optics over outcomes. What it does need is a thoughtful, step-by-step approach, solutions that target real systemic issues without creating new ones in the process. But that's not what we're seeing. Policies like DEI may have been framed as tools for fairness, but in practice, they've introduced unintended consequences. Consequences that risk lives, jobs, even public safety. Because when ideology trumps practicality, everyone loses. And if we don't find a way back to rational, results-driven governance, this divide, it's only going to get worse.
Sometimes on the left, they don't want to acknowledge progress because it interferes with virtue signaling. To say, we've come a long way, which we have.
It's okay to say that.
It's okay to say it,
okay.
But somehow you're a better person if you say, but there's work to be done. Of course there's work to be done. There's always work to be done. We're humans. We're on Earth. There's always going to be work to be done. But let's be realistic about where we are.